Well, as part of that around the country, you'll see more and more solar panels after that budget 2 weeks ago and its plans for tax incentives for rooftop solar panels for homes and businesses. There are going to be a lot more of them, and soon, anywhere you look, you're going to see a solar panel. But while they literally do produce electricity out of just sunlight, they also don't last forever. Some people are now worried about how difficult it will be to recycle them in 20 or 30 years' time. Francois Pretorius is at the Stellenbosch Business School. Francois, good afternoon to you. How difficult is it to recycle a solar panel?
Hi. Look, it's one of those questions where it's actually quite easy in terms of certain parts of it. I would say 90% of it is easily recyclable. The problem comes in with the last 10%, and that's where the problem lies, because that sort of last percentage, some say even the last 4%, is where high toxicity levels are, and that's where the problem comes in, specifically in the South African context.
So we can't just pack them off to a landfill. There'll actually be serious consequences if we do that.
Well, that's where the problem lies. I mean, at this stage, it's difficult to get the figures for South Africa, but in the US, only 10% of solar panels are actually being recycled. 90% end up in landfill. The problem with that is if those actually leak through, they seep it into the underground water system, etc. It is highly toxic, and it could pose a big problem to human development in the long term.
So which substances are we talking about that are so dangerous?
There's quite a few, and I'm going to be honest with you. I am not an engineer, but from my research, I mean, lead poisoning is one of the biggest issues with regards to that. Then there's quite a few different ones. And I mean, then also, with regards to the actual recycling process itself, the solar panels are predominantly made of glass, which, I mean, in essence sounds easy to recycle, but there's also some of those toxic elements in the actual glass. So that makes it really incredibly difficult to recycle. There are plants doing it in South Africa, but the problem comes in, as I say, about 90 to 95% can be recycled in South Africa. The other 5% at this stage either will get shipped overseas or it's going to end up in land.
It's interesting to see how technology changes. So, for example, in cell phones, just as an example, you need small amounts of certain metals like cobalt to make them work. It's actually almost impossible to make the current cell phones we have without them. So now often a cell phone company, say two of the big ones, you know which ones I mean, they'll take your old cell phone and recycle it for you. So if you want a new cell phone, they'll give you a discount if you give them your old cell phone, because they're taking the stuff out of it and basically recycling it for you. Could we see the same thing with solar panels? In 10 years' time, maybe 20 years' time, old solar panels will be used to make new solar panels, is my point.
Exactly. I mean, the South African government has actually done a great job with regards to that. There is legislation in place that places the onus on the supplier, the manufacturer, the importer, etc., but the supplier of the solar panel to take care of it at its end-of-life sequence. So essentially, at this stage, it's not much of a problem because most solar panels that have been made are still in use. They've got a life cycle of between 20 and 30 years. But in 30 years' time, 25 years' time, it's going to become a problem. At this stage, most of the manufacturers are selling it. There are plans to build recycling plants, etc., but it will need to be scaled up humongously as demand for solar panels increases in South Africa and in the African continent.
One of the problems with all of this is that we don't necessarily know what's being installed. We know a lot of stuff is being installed, but they aren't necessarily, from what I can see, huge norms and standards. Yes, they're accredited installers, there's this, there's that. But I don't know anyone anywhere. I think maybe the Gauteng Observatory's done some research, but there's very little sort of hard data on what's being installed where.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. It's also, there are different types of solar panels. I mean, you're looking at the photovoltaic, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but yeah, the PV panels are essentially the most common ones. They're installed everywhere, but there's also thin film ones. There are different ones coming into the market constantly, and that's one of the main issues also with recycling, is as the technology progresses and there's different types coming onto the market and being imported in South Africa, the recyclers are struggling to keep up with what's actually happening and how to recycle those components.